Knowledge time. JustProfessor here. Your brain sees two things close together and automatically assumes they're connected. This split-second assumption controls what you click, what you buy, what you understand, and what mistakes you make every single day. Designers know this and use it to manipulate you constantly, and you fall for it every time. Look at a website. You see a price next to a product, so you assume that's the price for that product. You see a button near some text, so you think the button relates to that text. You see two menu items close together, so you assume they're in the same category. This is proximity bias. Your brain automatically groups things that are physically close together and assumes they're related. This happens instantly without conscious thought. And it's being used deliberately in every interface, website, advertisement, and design you encounter to guide your behavior and sometimes trick you into mistakes. Proximity bias is when your brain assumes items that are physically close to each other are related to each other, even when there's no actual connection. Physical nearness creates perceived relationship. Your visual system groups nearby elements automatically, and your brain interprets those groups as meaningful. Things close together must go together. Things far apart must be separate. This grouping happens so fast and automatically that you're not consciously aware it's shaping your understanding. This happens because your brain is constantly trying to organize visual information into meaningful patterns. Proximity is one of the most basic organizing principles. In the real world, things that are near each other often are related. Parts of the same object, members of the same group, connected elements. So your brain uses proximity as a shortcut for determining relationships. This works well in natural environments but can be exploited in designed environments. The problem is proximity bias makes you see relationships that do not exist and miss relationships that do exist based purely on spacing and layout. Designers use this deliberately to guide your attention and interpretation. Sometimes they use it helpfully to make things clearer. Sometimes they use it to manipulate you into clicking, buying, or understanding things the way they want rather than accurately. And you can't stop proximity bias from working on you because it happens before conscious analysis. Let me show you where this controls your behavior. Website design uses proximity bias constantly. You see a price near a product image, and you automatically assume that's the price for that product without consciously verifying. E-commerce sites carefully control spacing to create these associations. Sometimes they put clearance prices near premium products to make you think you're getting a deal when you're not. The proximity creates the association your brain accepts automatically. Forms and interfaces rely on proximity to communicate what goes with what. You see a text box near a label, and you know what to enter because of the proximity. If the spacing is wrong and labels are equidistant between two fields, you make errors because proximity bias doesn't give you a clear signal about which field the label belongs to. Good interface design uses proximity to create obvious relationships. Bad design ignores it and creates confusion. Advertisements manipulate with proximity deliberately. They put positive images or text near products to create associations. A happy family near a car makes you associate the car with family happiness through proximity. Disclaimers and fine print are placed far from main claims to avoid proximity associations. They don't want your brain linking the disclaimer to the promise. The physical distance shapes what you connect mentally. Menu design in restaurants and on websites uses proximity to group related items. Items close together seem like they're in the same category or similar types. Items separated by space seem like different categories. Restaurants sometimes use spacing to make you think certain items are special or premium by isolating them with extra space, creating distinction through proximity bias. Pricing displays exploit proximity bias. You see 19 in huge text near a tiny per month in small text far away. Proximity bias makes you focus on the 19 and mentally downplay the per month because it's not spatially connected. If they put per month right next to the price, proximity would force you to process it as a unit. The spatial separation is deliberate to manipulate your perception. Data visualizations depend on proximity to be understandable. Points close together on a chart are seen as related or part of the same cluster. Points far apart are seen as different groups. This is how scatter plots communicate patterns through proximity of data points. But proximity can also mislead if scales are manipulated to make things seem closer or farther than they actually are. Physical store layouts use proximity. Products placed near each other seem related, so stores put complementary items close to encourage bundled purchases. Premium items near regular items make comparisons happen automatically through proximity. End cap displays work partly through proximity. Being near but separated from the main aisle makes items seem special without being too far to overlook. Text layouts rely on proximity for readability. Paragraphs are separated by space to show their different ideas. Lines close together are seen as part of the same paragraph. If spacing is wrong, you misunderstand structure because proximity creates the wrong groupings. Headings work through proximity. Being near following text but separated from preceding text by extra space makes the relationship clear. Icons and labels need proximity to work. An icon right next to text is clearly labeling that text. An icon with ambiguous spacing between two text elements creates confusion because proximity isn't giving a clear signal. Mobile interfaces fail constantly when tap targets are too close, creating accidental taps because proximity makes your brain think you're hitting one thing when you're actually hitting something nearby. So, how do you avoid being manipulated by proximity bias while still benefiting from good proximity design? First, consciously verify relationships. When you see things close together and assume they're connected, pause and verify that connection is real. Is that price actually for that product? Does that button really control that feature? Proximity creates assumption, but assumption needs verification when consequences matter. Second, look for deliberate spacing manipulation. When something important is spatially separated from what it modifies or relates to, suspect manipulation. Disclaimers far from claims, costs far from products, conditions separated from offers. These spatial separations are often deliberate attempts to use proximity bias to obscure connections. Third, use spacing deliberately in your own designs and communications. If you want people to see things as related, put them close together. If you want to show separation, use clear spacing. Help proximity bias work correctly by making your spatial relationships match your actual relationships. Don't fight proximity. Work with it intentionally. Fourth, be extra careful with ambiguous spacing. When elements are equidistant from multiple other elements, proximity bias doesn't know which connection to make and you'll interpret randomly or make errors. In your own work, never leave ambiguous proximity. In others' work, slow down and consciously determine relationships when spacing is unclear. Fifth, recognize proximity patterns that commonly mislead. Large price near small monthly indicator. Fine print far from main claim. Important buttons near unimportant content. Learning these common patterns helps you recognize when proximity is being used to manipulate rather than clarify. Sixth, test layouts by asking what proximity suggests. Look at any layout and ask what relationships the spacing creates. If the visual groupings don't match the actual relationships, the design is working against proximity bias and will confuse or mislead people. Either fix the spacing or recognize you're being misled. Proximity bias is making your brain automatically group things that are physically close and assume they're related. This happens instantly and unconsciously in every interface, website, advertisement, and design you encounter. Sometimes this helps you understand relationships quickly. Sometimes it manipulates you into seeing connections that don't exist or missing connections that do exist. Designers who understand proximity use it deliberately to guide your behavior. Good designers use it to make things clearer and easier to understand. Manipulative designers use it to create false associations, hide disclaimers, emphasize what benefits them, and trick you into decisions you wouldn't make if the relationships were spatially clear. Understanding proximity bias helps you see when spacing is being used to help versus mislead you. It helps you verify assumed relationships instead of trusting automatic groupings. And if you create any kind of visual content, it helps you use spacing effectively to communicate clearly rather than accidentally creating false relationships through poor layout. The next time you're looking at any designed space, website, app, advertisement, form, notice the spacing. What is close together? What is far apart? What relationships is your brain assuming because of proximity? Are those relationships real, or are they being suggested through deliberate spatial manipulation? That awareness is your defense against proximity bias being used to control your understanding and behavior. Subscribe to learn more about design biases secretly influencing your behavior every day.